So I think about learning a lot. Learning is one of my biggest passions, right? And it's why I think video games are so interesting. Each of them being their own universe, each of them having their own rules that they define, and then creating play spaces and interactive spaces for people to learn those rules, and how much you learn those rules greatly determines how much you enjoy a particular video game, right? So in addition to that, I think about learning a lot. I created a video game about learning. I've made streams about it before. You can probably check those out on this channel. But my game is called enLIGHTen. Let's see what I can do about showing you that. Boop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doot. Where is this? And we can even do game and logo and enLIGHTen. Boop. Not quite. Okay. Hey, it worked. So my game is called enLIGHTen. I worked on this for about 2 years. About a year ago, I stopped working on it, but prior to that I worked on it for 2 years. It's a game about learning. I just wanted to experiment with a lot of learning tools that I've been mulling over. Really curious and interesting things that I thought might help people learn. Some of the core inspirations for the game was I enjoy puzzle games a lot, and I know other people don't. It's in fact one of people's least favorite genres of all time. According to that one random poll I saw, people really hate platformers and puzzle games. So I want to kind of dig into why people fall off, why people enjoy it, and maybe potentially bridge the two. I created this game. It takes one of the simplest, but I think one of the most interesting puzzle games setups out there, and I designed all kinds of tools around it in order to, if I could, help people enjoy the game better, but if not, see what they were doing and kind of move on from there with my theories and everything. But when developing this game, I had an outlet to apply a lot of my theories about learning and see what the results are. So what I love about this game, you know, besides the really cool music, which I'll turn that up, and music was done by Hayden, volunteered, and I really appreciate it. A lot of this game was supported by the community, not monetarily, but just with a lot of feedback and a lot of people in the DO community just really sticking with it for the long haul. Because honestly, if they're not fans of puzzle games before, playing a puzzle game that's about learning, as rough as it was to the point where it is now, they really had to suck it up a little bit and really for the purpose of giving me the feedback that I needed. One of the things I did in this game was I created a lecture hall, and I explained my learning theory in 15 lectures or so, and then I extended for another 15 lectures with application, and then I have another 15 lectures beyond that that go even further. Each of these lectures are voiced. I'm not going to let you listen to my voice. Okay, I'll click one. Oh yeah, I took out all the audio. Good. So each of the lectures are about 2 minutes, and they come with pictures, right? You can see like, oh, you click through. Oh, I took out the pictures. Great. This version, 7.7. But yeah, each lecture had an explanation, slides, walk through the concepts one by one, really trying to lay out as clearly and as slowly as possible how I understand learning and what this game's about. So on the flip side, let me show you this. Hey, it's Bergen. What's up? We're supposed to do a podcast, Bergen. Do a podcast. Where you be at some point. So, right here. Right monitor. And kill the music. Yeah, you guys can still hear the music. Cool. So, one of the things I've done with this game over the long term is keep this channel just for feedback about this game, but it's also a place where I dump a lot of my ideas and random discoveries about learning. Yeah, I saw your tweet about Kickstarter, so best of luck. Hopefully they resolve that issue of you fully completing your obligations from a previous Kickstarter. But yeah, this is just an interesting clip. I'll show you this one.
before we get into it. When you're making ramen, you want to be in total control. And I would recommend writing your own recipes while you're going through this. And I always keep a spreadsheet or a log of all the different ramens that I've made. You can see here on my own spreadsheet, I list the ingredients by weight. I list the process that goes into it. You can see here that we've got today's date.
First of all, that's amazing. Somebody keeping a spreadsheet about stuff that they do, highly recommended. Obviously, I've recommended people do stuff like this for years. So it's cool to see somebody else doing it, especially in a completely unrelated discipline. He writes his recipes.
The fact that they
look like recipes, right? It's cool that the process and the steps are on the left side. Then he has his measurements in one column, and then he has the ingredients. But it kind of looks like how you would read a recipe, which is kind of spaced out on top to bottom. But you know, do whatever formatting you want. I just thought this was really interesting. So I posted this. This is just an example of one thing that I posted in the enLIGHTen channel. And I was like, hey, look, people using spreadsheets to keep track of all the complex things they do. And here's another one. Oh, yeah, cool. This was just when I was watching.
Take a little bit of filling. Don't take too much. Press it into the center.
And he's making dumplings or gyoza.
Pinch it together at the top, and that is a dumpling. No folds required whatsoever. Now, if you missed that, what I did was I essentially made 2 V's with my fingers. On my left hand, the index finger is straight. On my right hand, the index finger is bent. You then put them together so they make a V with your thumbs, and you squeeze one side with the index finger that's straight and the other side with the index finger that's bent, and you kind of get that crescent shape of a good dumpling. It's hard to another side with a bent index finger,
and look at that
is a dumpling shape. It makes life
so interesting. So we all more or less should be familiar with what the dumpling shape is. I've made dumplings before, just like this, from scratch with the pork, blending it together, getting the ingredients, rolling every single one by hand, and then pan searing it. A lot of work. Kind of want to do it again, but not soon. But the dumpling has a very distinct and signature shape, and it's that curve, which, you know, cool curved, right? It's hard to keep things straight. Maybe that explains why it's curved, but the particular ridges,
and actually it makes
the ridges that you see in the dumpling, I didn't realize were because of the ridges in the human hand, right? Like, I always just thought dumplings had a cool shape, and like, oh, it's lumpy, right? Like it has this like lumpy exterior right here. And I always thought, like, oh, parts of the meat chunks are in there, therefore some parts of the dumpling are more lumpy than others. But it turns out this is the exact internal imprint of the human hand when squeezed like that, and it makes so much more sense now. None of this is arbitrary. None of this is artistically chosen. It's just that is... dumplings look like this because human hands look like this, and human hands made them. So one of the cool things I pointed out in the channel is that... details always have a context. If you don't know the context, keep digging. If you just think things are random or this is just how the way it is, you should probably keep digging, and that's a really interesting way to kind of dig deeper into why the world works the way it does. So this is the kind of stuff I love posting on the channel, just things that I encounter in my everyday life, but the realizations are hopefully more and more profound. We talked a little bit about communal learning, but that's another stream for another time. Here's where I was watching Paul Barton, which is... a really good piano player and teacher that does videos on YouTube. And right here he says, what does he say? Repeated sections make new music. So he's playing the song. I didn't put the actual YouTube link. Lazy. But he was playing a song on piano, and he's breaking up a long song into 2 measures at a time, 4 measures at a time, whatever, and he repeats them over and 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 over. And one of the comments he made was, repeated sections make new music. And I thought that was really, really interesting. The fact that music, as we know it, is the sequence and the combination of different notes, not only the notes themselves, but the spaces in between and how those create superstructures. But when you take a piece of it out and then you repeat it, it then creates its own new structure from sheer sequencing, proximity, repetition, however you want to call it. And it makes new music. And that kind of reminds me of a fractal in a lot of ways. You can zoom in on a fractal and get more fractalness of its same fracticality if you do that. And it has a distinct sort of pattern that the big picture reflects, but it's also reflected in micro bits in the small picture. That's just kind of what it reminded me of, and I thought that was really neat. This kind of sets us up for talking about scale, and when we talk about information, you know, the scale in which you observe it, whether you're zoomed in or zoomed out, can give you a very distinct impression, right? So if you learn this song, like let's say I took the pieces of music, I gotta find the link for you guys because it's just really not worth me talking like this. Chopin Etude, number 10 for advanced practice. Advanced practice tutorial, yay. Repetition equals results. This is something he's stressing. Where was that in the video? That's why I love taking, I'm lazy.
Hi.
Right here. Micro studies, right? 2 bars. Just 2 bars of one hand in the song, and you have to practice this dozens, if not hundreds of times. I listen to this whole thing in the background at work. I just love listening to stuff like this. The very fact that the repetition itself to me sounds like not just like new music in itself. It sounds like I can hear his thoughts through the progression and repetition of these sections, and that's kind of what the whole purpose of this video is. And that's super cool. So that's Barton right there. So that's another thing that's kind of getting us closer and closer to our primary topic. And let me show you. So before we get there, let me give you a tiny roadmap of what we'll be talking about. Boop. Communal learning and recursion, we'll touch on that. enLIGHTen level, select recursion. Greengrass, it's a song from Barney. Infinite jukebox, sorting algorithms, arbitrary correlated sensory mapping, jigsaw puzzles, the function of memory, if we had a perfect memory, Descartes skills, syntax, Turing machines, language, reading sheet music, and hearing music. And there's some topics from Dio that Harborist wanted me to touch on too. Let's see. So the process from curiosity to making a principle, types of learners, training methods for each type of skill. Okay, so we're talking about Descartes skills, curiosity to principles, and types of learners. Okay. Curiosity to principles and different types of learners. Okay. So we got a lot to talk about. Let me just blow this up. It's not blowing up. There we go. That should be a little easier to read. And I will make it a specific color. What color? What color? Boop. Pink. Okay. So, where to start? Let's start with enLIGHTen. And let's start with enLIGHTen level, select recursion. From there, we will talk a little bit about curiosity to principles, or maybe that'll go first. Nope, don't do that. And we'll talk about different types of learners at the top. And then when we talk about this kind of recursion, we got to talk a little bit about communal learning. And then we talk about Greengrass, and we'll talk about different types of learners right here. Infinite jukebox, arbitrary color map, that goes after the jigsaw puzzles. So we can talk about this with different types of learners right here. If we have perfect memory, this can go into curiosity and principles right here. The function of memory is first, right? Arbitrary correlated things goes after that. Descartes skills can go into different types of learners like this, maybe even like this, a little fancy style. How do I do it? There, indented. Reading sheet music and hearing music. This is an interesting thing from Gödel Escher Bach, GEB, which is a book. I have it right here. Really interesting. We'll get to that later. Syntax Turing machines, arbitrary, blah, blah, blah. So that pretty much is a good way to organize it. So let's start at the top, the function of memory. And repetition, so cool. About blog archives. So just to prove that I'm not completely making this stuff up, I wrote this. I love just being able to drag that back and forth. It's really convenient. I wrote this article called The Function of Memory right here in my blog, and I wrote it in, what, 2008? Yeah, October 15th, 2008, almost 11 years ago. And it just talks about experiencing and remembering are the same to the mind, the unconscious mind, and dreams, organizing, categorizing, stored memories outside the mind, blah, blah, blah. You know, I was taking really neat courses in college, and these were some of the things that I was thinking about because of that. But I think about it, and one of the most interesting parts about Ender's Game, which, if you recall, I did a little book review of, let's see, youtube.com/design-oriented. I did a sort of book review reflection on Ender's Game, but I also read 2 books afterwards, including Ender's Shadow, which was starring another character from the story named Bean, and Bean is apparently like a super genius. And one of the things that they described Bean as having as far as a inherent characteristic, where's my Ender's Game thing? Right here, DO Live Ender's Game, if you want to know what I think about Ender's Game. An hour of just me talking about it. One of the cool things about the ways they describe Bean is he has a perfect memory. And because he has a perfect memory, he can just do things that we just can't so naturally. He picks up languages like nobody's business. He can just immerse himself into a crowd of people speaking all different kinds of languages and basically fluently learn the language after a short period of time because he has perfect memory. He remembers everything he hears. And from there, you know, there's a mystery in how exactly he uses these memories. But let's just say because of that, he's able to do what he does. It's a fictional character, but the idea is pretty interesting, right? If you have perfect memory, how would life be different? And that's what this article is kind of getting at. And then, you know, 11 years later, I'm still thinking and talking about it. So if we had a perfect memory, there's a question that I ask, and boop, and let's get the music back up. My music. There we go. So one of the things I ask in the lectures, so there's also quizzes, right? Instead of just lectures. Haha, you're in school, too bad. One of the things I ask in one of these quizzes is, how do you think your experience with this game would change if you had a perfect memory, right? And people have various answers. Let's see if I can even find it. So what's cool, here's another cool feature, is you can take these quizzes at any time. You can answer any question you want, but when you do, it shows what your friends, you can put in a friend code, it shows you what your friend has answered. And you can see how much your answers align up with theirs. Like when you're really familiar with the solution of a pattern, what do? Click the squares in different orders to mix things up. Akamarak, which is another DL member, and I have that in common, right? And you can see where we have things in common and where we don't have things in common. I'm not going to find that question, but that's interesting, right? So one of the cool parts about this game is you start off in the middle and the puzzles are really easy. Every layer you go out, the puzzles, I don't know why there's a hole here, the puzzles get harder and harder, and more clicks are required. Like everything on layer 4 requires 4 clicks. Everything on layer 5 requires 5 clicks, right? And what I do with the game is I keep track of the different paths that you take, hitting other puzzles as you get down to this perfect solution, or as you get down to a perfect solution. And then these pathways are mapped from your own play. So if you discover something like this goes into this one, that one, that one, it's only going to show up if you actually physically do it when you're playing. So not only are there a lot of puzzles, right? Over 100, but there are a lot of ways that each puzzle can go into each other puzzle, and it's just, that makes it a lot more to remember. Like, this is one of the most complex ones in the game, right? Can you remember all that? It just gets more and more complex as the complexity increases, right? So one of the things I did to help players out, one of the tools that I like the most is this ability to, where is it? Write notes. And when you can write notes, it takes a little snapshot of the screen. You can type in whatever you want, and then you can say whatever you want. And that was an effort to help people basically have perfect memory, when otherwise it'd be really hard to remember every single thing you did in this game, right? And another cool part is as you're playing, like this is what the normal game looks like, and you click it like that. You try to do stuff like that. Or you can solve it a lot more elegantly like that. But essentially when you're playing, I give you access to all these tools, and each one is designed for a different purpose. Mostly the game's too loud. Are you too loud, game? You can be quiet. Okay. Each tool is designed for a different purpose, and one is just keeping track of every place that you click. So this is something you could do if you had a pencil and paper, but I do it for you so you don't waste your time. And as you scroll up and down in the history, right, you can see the clicks appearing and disappearing. Another cool thing is I keep track of all the clicks you've made. So you can go backwards in history like this. Or you can go forward in history. And everything is there. But another thing I do is relevant notes, right? So as you're playing, we'll reset it. As you're playing, the notes that are relevant to the one you're solving appear, like another case of space travel. So I have a hashtag space travel with my notes, and I make a note of everything that looks like it's having to do with space because I think it's funny. But this note right here, which I can click on and keep up on the screen instead of mousing over, it's just something that I thought at the time, one random thought, one random day, preserved forever. And the effect that taking notes like this has on your ability to master this game is quite profound. So in order to illustrate that, I created a records mode, and you can go to your stats at any time. And, you know, I had already beaten this game multiple times, so my stats aren't really reflective of a brand new learner. But you can see the progress of how many you solved, how many puzzles you perfected, and so on and so forth. And you can look at your scores over time and try to find places where your scores either flatten out or spike, and you're like, what is the cause of this spike right here? You can see your stats and how they grow over time. But there's a lot of tools here to help you identify and reflect on your own experience. If you're a person who didn't take any notes, and you didn't believe that notes could actually help you improve in the game, but then all of a sudden you take notes and you get this huge spike in performance, you know that correlated. You taking notes and that spike are related, right? Are correlated. So there's tons of things to ask yourself, there's tons of things to explore, and this game really helps you do that. So going back to this, the function of memory, boop, you're gone. If we had a perfect memory, things would be different. This game tries to get you a perfect memory. You get to see the effect of what it's like to have everything at your fingertips for the most part, and how that changes your ability to master something. So curiosity to principle, let's jump back. So one of the interesting things about this game is I introduced this, I defined this learning model. I even forgot what I called it, but it's like CTPM. I should probably remember this, but it's basically explaining that in order to be a high functioning player in this game, in order to master it, which is something that I do measure, right? You have this mastery, and I got 100% mastery. It's being measured on these 5 different axes, right? And each of those you can earn by doing various things in the game. So it's complicated, but it's detailed. So you can only master the game, I found, if you have a certain approach to the game. And the only way you can get that approach, the only way I found to define it, is in your head you have a lot of specific principles and techniques that you go to in order to navigate the vast possibility space when you're solving. The only way you can get those specific principles is, even if you look them up online, it's not the same. there is definitely something to, when you fully understand something, having the necessary experience to back it up instead of just taking the end result and thinking that that's all there is to it. So I found that players need to have a certain amount of principles, and that those principles only come from reflecting, right, with thoughts. Those thoughts only come from playing puzzle mode and daily challenge for the most part, like actually engaging in actual scenarios in which you are challenged to, do a specific thing instead of doing whatever you want. And then the only reason that people will spend that much time, the necessary amount of time, exploring these two modes with the challenges is if they have a certain level of curiosity in the first place. So, NPR has been telling me for years that, was it the Arthur P. Sloan Foundation or something like that, where they try to increase the curiosity in adults and measure the curiosity quotient or whatever. I just thought that was a neat thought. But apparently curiosity is really important to learning. The more you have of it, the more you're going to get this experience. The more of this, you're going to think more. The more you think, the more you can distill it down to the very few methods or processes you need in order to be a high-functioning individual. So that's why this isn't a pyramid shape, right? You start here, and then every time the effort you put here kind of goes into here, and it concentrates, and all the effort here goes into a little effort here, and a little effort here goes into a tiny effort here. So you can see how much energy you have to shove into learning in order to get these. These are very precious, very hard earned, but definitely the product of doing all this. So in this game, you gain more curiosity by, listening to the lectures or doing the quizzes. You gain more curiosity just by exploring the game all on your own. This mode is explore mode, so you can make whatever puzzle you want. You can click however much you want. You can write whatever notes you want, but there's no goal. So this is pure for your own curiosity and edification. And then records. The more you look at your records, how you've played and how your progress is doing, that builds your curiosity, right? So that's the theory. And the game records all the data in order to prove it. People who spend no time in explore mode have a hard time playing this game at a high level. I'm not just making this up. You can see their stats. Let's take a look at the stats of Akamarak. So when you isolate a single stat, Akamarak's favorite color is this dark orange. So keep a lookout for that. But he started off well, like most people do. In the first half hour or so, hitting a bunch of puzzles. If you don't give up and quit at that point, you'll soon find yourself plateauing. And then you might hit another growth spurt and you'll plateau. He plateaued for about 2 hours here. And this doesn't mean that he was trying to solve all the puzzles and he failed. This just means as the hours crept along with his time in the game, he didn't make any more progress solving puzzles. But then it crept up and plateaued and crept up and plateaued. And so we can compare that to, you can compare that to some of his daily challenge scores, right? He's much better at some. You can see the orange. He was struggling with this one, but then they had a huge breakthrough at 23 hours, and then at 27 hours. So we could look at what happened at those times, but we're busy. We got lots to talk about. Rocky start there, uneven quality until he tapered out at the end, really mastered that one. High functioning on this one, right? So the dots are the actual entries of data. So that's a new feature I put into this version of the game. So you can see how many times he actually attempted that particular challenge. And this one he attempted a lot, right? This is probably the hardest one for him. Had a lot of roughness right there, some success, and then he finally was able to master it. But this is quite a sharp climb right here at 24 hours, right? Something happened. But we can always look at the time spent in the various modes right here. So if I isolate it, that one's cut off screen. So I didn't spend any time in explore mode. I've already beaten this game. It's my game and I was just testing, so I don't need it. But it's interesting to see that Akamarak's time in explore mode slowly climbed up as he played. His time in puzzle mode, what happened? Steadily climbed up. Looks like he was doing everything steadily. Didn't do any daily challenges at first and then steadily did it. So he probably had a routine in which he did a little of everything. time looking at notes. Started doing it at about 7 hours in, and so on and so forth. Hours in the level select, just looking at the graphs and stuff. He did a lot more of that than a lot of other things, but it's steady. So interesting. But yeah, curiosity is really important. On a very sort of easy to understand basic level, curiosity allows you to spend a lot more time doing a thing without being tired, right? A lot more things stick from the experience because it's where you want to be and what you're interested in, and that just pays dividends all the way down, right? If you could remember it more easily, which is why we talked about the perfect memory. If you're so interested in a thing that every time you see it, it's just like straight into your brain, straight into your long-term memory, and you just never forget it, that's such a boost in power. I just can't stress that enough. And there are ways to foster curiosity and build it, but we're not really talking about that right now. So yeah, that's basically so you take notes in puzzle mode or daily challenge, but then you go into your thoughts. You can look at all your notes. I made all kinds of features, right, to help people search. Like if I ever said the word hard, these are when I talked about puzzles that were hard or whatever. You can filter it by these additional filters like this. I want to see all my own tips. I want to see all my own shapes that I marked. I want to see all my own solutions, and it just filters it like that. And you can take a look. You can even filter it by like what window, how many days back do you want it? 12 days back to 30 days back. How many hours of game time? I want to see all my notes from when I had 5 hours to 23 hours. And how about your overall scores in mastery? I only want to see notes when I'm close to mastery, right? So you do something like this. And look at that UI. That's so fun. But yeah, super detailed tools just in case you want to see it. I also have an alternate way of viewing your notes. Oops. Forgot how I clear the filter. This is the easiest way. You can also view your notes like this, and you can see the different symbols and be like, oh, I'm curious. All the notes that are colored are notes I grabbed from other people's game experiences. So they represent when somebody else did something I thought was interesting and I pulled it into my own experience. But yeah, from taking notes and looking at them, you can then form groups, and finding patterns among the things that you observe is really important. Because finding patterns can help you identify underlying rules or logic, and when you identify logic, you can then, with accuracy, predict what things are happening, or reduce wasteful thoughts. It's just so much more efficient to know how it works rather than to think you know how it works, or to have a whole bunch of experiences that you're like, well, sometimes it's like this, sometimes it's like that. It's so much easier to memorize one rule than to memorize like 10, 20, 100 cases to try to get close to what that rule is going to do. So I encourage people to make these hashtags. I encourage them to, after you make a hashtag, and you can use them when you're making notes, you can sort all the puzzles in the game by your hashtags. Like I have asymmetrical puzzles right here, and these are all the asymmetrical puzzles. And you can Venn diagram cross compare them with other categories that you make, like this pointer. So this one in the middle is both a pointer and an asymmetrical puzzle, but these are just pointers, and you can really start to see how the things you observed overlap, and that's half the point of this thing. Just more ways of looking at information, more high-level ways of defining it, grouping it, observing it, and then from there, I have this tool here where you're supposed to, well, that tool is probably not working right now. But yeah, that's the whole process. And when I explain it explicitly like that, a lot of people don't think it's that big of a deal, but it's just like cooking, right? I can explain to you how much you need to knead the dough, how much you need to let it rise, how much XYZ, and you can kind of wing it and get close, but it's not quite the same. You won't have the same good results or consistent results unless you do the things that I say or know exactly how to make adjustments. So you may understand what I just said, but there's so much more to it in terms of applying it to actual learning situations. So yeah, the enLIGHTen level select has its own type of recursion. Right, I showed you with the lines, and every time you're solving it, you can kind of go back over things that you've seen before because you're solving it all the way down. That creates a kind of repetition. It's not quite recursion, right? Let me just make sure I The repeated application of a recursive procedure. Recursion occurs. Well, I can just show you. Recursion occurs when a thing is defined in terms of itself. Yeah, this is not quite recursion. A lot of this is repetition, but we'll talk about recursion later. Repetition is really important, and repetition in general is important. People know that you repeatedly do something to build muscle memory or long-term memory. There's a lot of truth to that. So when playing this game, the further you move to the outside, you see more and more of the insides, and they become more and more familiar. That's why I keep tracks of stats like you've seen this puzzle, and whenever you play the entire game, you've seen this puzzle 5 times total. You have 0 notes to this puzzle, and there are 0 shapes that connect down to it. But if you do one like this, you're like, you've seen this puzzle 94 times. There are 0 notes written for this puzzle, but there are 8 connections that connect down to it. And we can zoom out like this. Or maybe that means, I don't know what that means. I programmed it, but it means something. And you get even closer. You've seen this puzzle 157 times. And then you've seen this puzzle 849 times. So a little trick, these 3 in the middle, whenever you solve any puzzle, it has to end with one of these 3 shapes, right? So that's why these are up in the thousands, right? But the further you move out, like 16 times, 15 times, 27 times, 49 times, that's pretty high. 29 times, 94 times, that's crazy. That kind of gives you a little bit of insight on which puzzles you naturally flow down into and which ones you probably need to study a lot more in order to not get stuck by them. 7 times, 40 times, 5 times. Yeah, that's rare. So yeah, repetition is pretty important, and it's important to learning. It's important that the game creates a structure in order for you to get that repetition in a nice, clean, clear way. A lot of video games with their difficulty design, they make it harder for you to get the repetition you need. They make it harder for you to get the feedback you need. They make it harder for you to do repeated trials, and all that I consider to be bad game design for the most part. And that's why my game is the exact opposite of most games you see. So, boom, different types of learners. I'm not going to go over this too much, but I will say that different aspects of enLIGHTen were designed around different types of learners. Like if you want to do everything on your own, the puzzle mode just kind of lets you go crazy. If you want to just do the challenges early on, you can just grind that out. If you want to explore and just take a bunch of notes and record everything, you can do that. But as far as visual, audio, sensory, linguistic, tactile, I try to give you as many tools for that as possible. The game has sound. The game lets you take notes. The game's clicky, so that helps. But another thing I did with this game is every cell makes a sound. Right? And if you're more keen on audio feedback, the correlated sounds may actually help you realize certain things that otherwise you wouldn't. So I'll turn that up a little bit so you can hear it. This is the Fire Emblem thing, by the way. So it's cool that I recognize certain solve patterns, make certain melodies, and that's just completely sort of random, right? I just picked notes here, but the fact that some puzzles have those distinct melodies and others don't, it's just kind of random. But there's something interesting to be said about that, and that's kind of where we're going to move on to next. One thing about learning is learning things is complex. In general, you need to have all your senses open in order to make sure you don't miss something that could potentially be important: a sound, a texture, a taste, a smell, something that it does, a result which you see with your eyes. Therefore, the more sensory immersive an experience is, the more chances you have of both observing those things and for you to find patterns in those things, right? So for that reason, a lot of hands-on experience is always going to be best for just about every type of learner, right? They're in the thing, they're actually doing it, whether you're visual, tactile, oral, linguistic, whatever, you could probably do all those things while doing the thing itself, and that only helps. So with enLIGHTen, you have access to the actual thing all the time. So I didn't think I really need to cater to a lot of different types of learning beyond that, besides giving you the notes and putting in music. But there's a lot more. There are different ways to analyze the different types of learners, but I think I'd rather not focus on different types of learners and focus more on the individual areas like curiosity, exploration, processing your thoughts, stuff like that. Like what area the learner is focusing on most and what area they could potentially focus on to boost their performance, right? So it's not about being this type of learner or that. It's about, well, regardless of what type you are, what are you gravitating towards? What are you curious about? And what other things might you do to help? So in that way, the Descartes skills, Harbers wanted to know a little bit about the Descartes skills and how they apply to something. Let me read it. Training methods for each skill, right? Again, there are... You need to be quiet. That's just too much. Again, the DO channel has the video completely on reflex, on timing, on dexterity, and on knowledge. These are 4 of the aspects of the Descartes skills that we made games for, my brother and I, many, many years ago to test this theory and to see if there was anything to it. They goes over these in details, but in general, you're not trying to exercise a skill. These are ways of measuring what skill you're already doing to do whatever. So in a similar way, I think doing whatever is always the focus. So it's not like, how do I get more of this kind of reflex? The question is, this thing keeps happening. How do I prevent it? How do I better understand it? What things can I do to train for that? And then you can realize, oh, because I'm better at this type of reflex, maybe blah, blah, blah. Maybe I can supplement that with knowledge, maybe blah, blah, blah. Like, then you can start using the breakdown, the analysis. So that's kind of my quick answer for that one. So let's talk a little bit about recursion with communal learning. So communal learning is going to be a topic of another video entirely. It's just it's a way I describe my preferred learning environment and something that I feel like I've been participating in and fostering and creating my entire life with my family and my friends and what we do here at DO and the Mario Maker workshop. So I gave it a name, and I'm just trying to do a good job of defining it and seeing where that takes us. But ultimately, oops, you're not even seeing it. Boop. Communal learning right at the top. Ultimately, and I gotta make sure you can see the Twitch chat too. Ultimately, communal learning, should I just read you the thingy? It's just, no. Communal learning is about building a community, and in that community, you leverage social dynamics and other learning theories in order to help boost the learning of not only yourself, but everybody else. Communal learning is about teaching the community and boosting the quality of that experience rather than any individual getting, X amount of skill, any individual rising above the ranks. Like, the community is for the community and for no other higher purpose than that. So with that in mind, communal learning, if one person learns one thing, that person, then teaches the other people in the community, and then those people teach other people. And you can see a lot of repetition that might happen as that continues to branch out. But what a cool thing is, the method that we apply to learn something and teach it then gets reapplied as other people down the line continue to teach it again. And it's not just straight repetition. It's like if we teach according to a very simple method or principle, and we apply that every time we attempt to reteach or pass on the information, it sort of strengthens itself in a recursive manner. And any natural way that we have of pruning out bad information, focusing on the good information, finding better ways to convey good information, all that slowly gets concentrated as the community does its thing and as the information is passed along the individual members in the community. So as you hang out with your friends, because it's a community, they better be your friends. You better care about them. As you hang out with your friends, you'll hear natural things pop up. You'll hear the same things pop up again. you'll catch things that you didn't catch before, and then you'll tweak as it goes along. And that's a really interesting learning environment, really effective for a lot of other reasons. But that was just all I wanted to say about that. So then we start drifting into the land of jigsaw puzzles. So one cool thing about this is, let's go. I already got here, didn't I? Cool, we're close. I did a DO something or other. Where is it? On jigsaw puzzles? Puzzling language. A puzzle of sorts. And look, the same sorting algorithm is there, right? It's like I talk about the same stuff all the time. But yeah, this is a video specifically talking about what you do with information, how you can sort it, and how complex sorting can be, how you group it, how complex grouping can be, defining things and forming categories and doing overlaps. Chunking information is a type of grouping, but it's more for recall and association rather than for defining new groups. And what do they call that? Yeah, groups. Like group theory in math, groups. It's a good enough word. And then I talked about jigsaw puzzles in this, and I used to make fun of jigsaw puzzles because jigsaw puzzles seem like the least cognitively interesting type of puzzle in the world. You just pick up a piece and you see what it connects to, and you compare everything one by one to everything else one by one. It takes a long time. It's not very interesting. Boo. To my surprise, after studying a little bit of what other YouTubers have done and said about showing off their techniques doing jigsaw puzzles and what they love about jigsaw puzzles, I finally got it, right? Like, oh, though the puzzle is simple, its complexity gives you the opportunity to apply sorting, grouping, and filtering type skills to the situation to not only increase your effectiveness at solving the jigsaw puzzle, but to also increase your enjoyment while doing so. I thought that was really interesting. The video's there for you to look at. It's right here, puzzle of sorts. But we're going to kind of extend off of that, right? Boop. I got to make sure I don't constantly talk because people do need time to think. Ha! Yeah, right. So that's what's cool about jigsaw puzzles. But another cool thing about jigsaw puzzles, the very nature of it is you have a big picture, literally a big picture. Haha, I can use literally correctly today. And you cut it up, and then you have all these pieces, and these pieces represent a piece of the big picture. We talk a lot about learning, about breaking things down. You got to break things down. You got to understand the fundamentals. You got to understand the basics. You got to understand the pieces. You got to work with a good foundation. Break it down. Break it down. Simple, then get to the complex, which is a neat notion. Obviously, there's a lot of truth to that, but I think the reason why we stress that so much is so many people try to directly grasp the bigger picture, the abstractness of a lot of concepts and things, or the end result, rather than having, like I said before, that experience that leads up to it that really supports it, so you really know what you're doing. And because people see a thing and they're like, I want to do it, and then they directly try to do it, nobody sees like a dunk in basketball or free throw or an amazing three-point shot and goes, I want to practice some basic ball handling drills. I want to make sure I know how to hold a ball and bounce it in my palm with my fingertips before I even let it release from my hand. I want to understand proper form, technique, follow through. And then maybe after doing all that, I'll try to shoot a three-point shot. No, they directly try to shoot the three-point shot, fail a bunch, and hopefully somewhere down the line someone slows it down, breaks it down, and has them train all those specific things I just said in order to build the necessary skill up. So it's not that I will say it's not that we're breaking a lot of things down. It's that we are foolishly trying to grab the big picture, and we need to just build up from the pieces that we do understand and the pieces that we see around us. But anyway, that was just a little thing about breaking things down. And ultimately, I think I said that to say that perhaps all activities, all disciplines, all exercises of skill, all whatever, are really always have been and always start with the individual pieces, and it's all about building up, not breaking down. Something to keep in mind. So here we have the green grass, right? And this is an example. Hey, Barney, what's up? I watched this episode when I was a kid, and I loved it. So interesting remembering so much about when you were little and what you thought. And, like, I haven't changed in so many different ways since I was a kid. The same thoughts I have and the same reasons why I had those thoughts are the same. Kind of scary, kind of life at that point. But I liked the song when I was a kid, in addition to the 12 Days of Christmas, because of the repetition.
Hey guys, come look at this.
It's probably going to get my video flagged on YouTube. I hate that. Like, what the heck am I supposed to do? There was a hole.
That you ever did see. And the green grass grows all around, and the green grass grows all around.
In this hole,
And in this hole,
there was a tree.
there was a tree.
The prettiest tree
Apparently all the trees are pretty,
that you ever did
and everything in the song is pretty. In the tree, in the ground, in the hole, in the ground. You can start to see the pattern, the repetition here. Every time you're going to add another piece to this image, this concept they're building of this tree and what's happening in this tree. But every time they step it all the way back down, this is more or less like, it's not sequential, it's just more like moving from one detail to the other. And I guess it's not sequential in terms of a timeline. Maybe it is, but you can't have the tree until it's growing. You can't have it growing until it's a hole in the ground. You can't have a branch on the tree until it's grown enough. So it is denoting a particular kind of sequence, and that sequence is reflecting true to life requirements. So let's zip ahead in the song.
Well, the nest on the branch, and the branch on the tree, and the tree in the hole, and the hole in the ground. And the
Yay!
The nest on the branch, and the branch on the tree, and the tree in the hole, and the hole in the ground. And the green grass grows all around, and the green grass grows all around. In this egg.
So that's cool. The natural repetition there I find particularly interesting. Kind of like the enLIGHTen level select. You start off with the basics, and then you do more complex stuff, but every time you always remember to go back down and remember that you started off with the basics. And that's why I preface this whole section with maybe everything is just basics, and every time you try to grasp the big picture, you're probably doing yourself a disservice if you can't walk it all the way back down, because that proves you don't have the necessary experience to even be considering that on that level anyway. So the enLIGHTen level select, and the way that it branches out from the middle, I guess I didn't show you, but it only starts off with that core, and you have to keep unlocking rings as it goes out. And this song, starting with the hole in the ground and growing up from there, ensures not only is the proper sequence sort of observed and done, but it reiterates that through its natural repetition. I think that's really good. I think there's something really important there. We're just going to have to keep that in mind moving forward. I'm lost. Here we go. Green grass, thank you, Barney, for your time. Let me try this. So, this is something that I've been obsessed about for a long time. You may have seen it on the DO Live at other points, because I talk about the same things over and over because I think some things are just amazing. That's all. What happened? Okay. Pick a song. I'm gonna type in Mega Man. And let's do Dr. Wily's Castle. It loads up the song. Oh, I probably already had a link to this, didn't I? That you ever did see. This is probably not the song I wanted. It's pretty good though. We'll keep it. That's not good enough. That is not good enough. Hold on, guys. Okay, so basic idea. The song gets uploaded, the system scans it, it finds points in the song where on that note, on that beat, there's another part of the song that has either the exact same or a very similar sound, makes the same sound at the same time. And then it makes a branch. And you can see like this part of the song has a lot of branches. You can just kind of hover over it and see like, oh, this part of the song right here could jump to this part of the song. And this one could potentially, oh, that's a double? Maybe she's overlapping. And when you listen to it, the jukebox will play like this around the clock, but then randomly jump every time it hits a branch. It will either randomly jump or not. And when you listen to it, it can turn a song that only had one, 3-minute playthrough session into an infinite song, and thus, it's why we call this the infinite jukebox, or in this case, the eternal jukebox. So listen. I love this intro. You'll never hear that again. It jumped. It jumped. We're down the bottom. So this song is good because the seams are really hard to tell. Oh, that was cool. It just made like a new, I don't even know what to call that. It dragged the measure out before continuing just because of the jumps. So now we're in a section with no jumps, and it might jump right here. Nope. I'm gonna make sure that's not too loud, because it's loud in my ears. Cool, we're in a section that's not going to jump. It jumped. Another section that won't jump. Really cool. With no connections, basically. Oh, we're back at the beginning. And I like the little marks on the side indicate when that section has been played, and it just keeps building up. And I wonder if we're ever going to get into this colored area over here on the left. Who knows? But this reminds me a lot of... So this reminds me a lot of the enLIGHTen level select, right? But this is a different kind of repetition. This is one that finds... Well, let me think. So the enLIGHTen level select was done with a very particular meaning in mind. The shapes can flow from one thing to another, therefore I'm going to draw those connections for you. This just comparing the sound footprint and making a connection, not the same, it doesn't have any inherent meaning, like I guess rule-wise or gameplay-wise, besides these things sound the same. It's not even making sure that, oh, it just did the thing again, that's cool. It's not even making sure that, like, oh, I'm at the end of a measure, I'm going to only look for sound beats that are at the end of the measure. It's completely just like, whatever. If it sounds the same, it sounds the same. Oh, that's cool. Man, that's really neat how it does that 3 times instead of 2 or 3+ times. Oh, it just did it once! So this is what the magic of the infinite jukebox is. The more you understand the music, the more you anticipate the patterns, the more it delights. Ooh, that was weird. But yeah, taking something, in this case, the bigger picture is the song itself, and just like we talked about with Barton, how you divide it up and how you repeat it in itself can create either interesting possibilities, new possibilities, or highlight things about the original that you didn't quite understand before without having it sort of focus on that. Oh, it actually made it to that little section. Nice. Oh, it jumped to the bottom left. It did that the first time as well. Ooh, we're near the end. Oh, you can hear it. The little cadence. But we might jump. There's a lot of branches here. We jumped. It's pretty much never going to get to the ending, which is cool. But this is what the ending sounds like. It fades away, right? And you would know because there's no jumping points here. And you're like, oh. So the infinite jukebox has like, I'm going to guess a 1.00001% chance of actually hitting this ending. Because all it has to do is do any of these jumps at any of these points. I guess it could jump from, I guess, here to here. Maybe the chance is not that small. But it doesn't matter. The song ended. How interesting. Yeah, that's the infinite jukebox. That's what I think is interesting about it. It has a lot of interesting similarities to what we were talking about, but you get to see it and you get to hear it. So that's how we're going to move on to our next topic. Seeing and hearing it. Here's the cool thing about Goresh Bach, which I'm going to drag this up here. I was reading this book many years ago. How long was it? Oh my gosh. 6 or 7 years ago? Why? I'm so old. But one of the interesting things that this book brought up was it had an example of what sheet music might look like to an alien, right? And they see it and they'd be like, oh, I see a lot of structure here. Look, these little bars, they denote sections, and it looks like there's a mathematical relationship to how many things can go in each section. Interesting music. And check this out. You know, when this has a key signature, these marks over here, these marks show up. Ooh, correlation. And if they knew nothing about music, they could look at sheet music and probably extract a lot of principles, a lot of rules out of it. But the cool part is, imagine to their surprise, when they realize, when they finally visit Earth, and like, check this out, we've been studying your culture, we love these pieces of white paper with black marks on there, and somebody goes, hold on, and grabs it, puts it in front of a piano, and and for the first time ever, they realize those marks have a whole completely other sort of universe to them. They weren't just visual, and they weren't just syntactically, mathematically balanced. They were in service of this other way to experience them, or there's a whole nother way to experience them, and it feels completely different to hear music than to just look at dots on the page. So that was such an interesting example because it talked a little bit about the meaning that can be encoded in syntax and how syntax points to things, and if you don't know what they're pointing to, you could be missing out, and all other kind of cool stuff that I don't remember off the top of my head, but I probably wrote about in one way or another in my blog. So that's why that's cool. That's why that's cool. So now we're going to move on to sorting algorithms, and this is something that I was listening to recently. Is this it? All right, we'll give you a simple example. Let's hope it doesn't hurt your ears. See how it's scanning through everything and then finding the right one and putting it at the top and then slowly sorting it? This is a lot like the jigsaw puzzle things. Each one of these sorting algorithms is a method to take a whole bunch of unsorted things and to give meaning to them, or to arrange them in a way where they have the most meaning. In this case, sequential order is what the goal is. In the jigsaw puzzle's case, assembling the larger, bigger picture. This one's going back and forth. It's doing the left side and the right side. It's called a cocktail shaker sort. Oop. I gotta check the, hey, it's hard roast. Yo, I'm so bad at doing that. And my head's in the way. So, you might have gotten tired of these algorithms already, right? You're like, what's the point? What's the takeaway? I watched this video, this entire video. It's 31 minutes. And then I watched it again. And then I watched another video that's an hour long. And then I listened to it again, not fully. And then I'm watching more videos. Now, look at this one. Woo! Look at that selection sort. Look at that. Fast. There's a double selection sort. Insertion sort. Interesting. So you may be wondering, yeah. Hey, Bleach is here too. You may be wondering, like, what's the big deal with all these random algorithms? Well, let's unpack it. One, each of these algorithms are powered by a set of rules, probably a small set of rules, probably a set of rules that you could potentially think about and extract, just knowing that this system here is pretty simple. The white lines are just represented by numbers, right? They're not actually white lines. It's just a visualization of arrange 2,000 numbers, as you can see in the top left. Arrange 2,000 numbers from 0 to 2,000, right? Or 0 to 1,999 or something like that. And you arrange it. That's it. So this line just represents like the number value as it goes vertical, right? Nothing crazy. Extracting rules is interesting. It's a high-level process. It takes quite a lot of effort. It's exactly what I was describing and demonstrating in enLIGHTen. Yeah, you can play the game, and maybe you'll remember some of the shapes. Maybe you'll remember all the solution patterns you've done, but that doesn't mean that you're going to extract a wide range of methods or principles or techniques. You could just be ironing in the one technique that you just happen to stumble upon your first playing. So extracting rules is important. You can do it by observing a lot of different things, and then you can, again, use your experience with observing those things or doing those things and making patterns or groups, defining things, sorting those groups, observing those groups for additional patterns, and then from there you can potentially extract a principle that says something like, every time X group happens after Y pattern, Z pattern happens. Like, those are pretty interesting observations that could be just correlations, but the more you test it, then they become stronger and stronger. You're like, oh, I have a really good principle here. Or you use that principle to then generate another set of observations, and then from there you keep refining it. So Harper says these algorithms are also classified based on their efficiency, called Big O notation. Yeah, I read a little bit about that. Efficiency is calculated based on how many times the data list is accessed. Yep. Lots of crazy things. So I'm looking at these algorithms and I'm like, wow, look at it go. Look at it sort all this stuff, right? And I'm going to turn it down so you're not freaking driven out of your mind. But recently, beyond just a exercise in understanding algorithms and thinking about what computers do, recently, when I watch this, I see something unique, like this, for example. Look at this. What the heck? Look at that. That didn't look very, or I should say, that looked very organic. And why did this look organic to me? And this is when I started to make some interesting connections, right? Look how many times it has to scan that. Look at that. So it's an algorithm like this that really got me to start thinking. Right here. Not this one. Okay. And I'm like, well, isn't it interesting how many times that one had to scan through the same thing over and over in order to refine it into something that was finally perfect? I'm like, yeah, isn't that interesting? Wait a minute. with learning, you have to go over things over and over in order to get them into long-term memory, or just when you're thinking about it over and over. I'll show you. Golly, this is cool. So, you know, reviewing your notes is a form of going over things over and over, but this higher process stuff, the stuff at the end, that's why I call it my process. It's where you figure out what your process is, your method. Look what happens. You can add anything to this list, like diagonal symmetry. I require you to define it, so these shapes are symmetrical only on the diagonal line. Cool, simple. And then I let you look at every puzzle in the game, including puzzles you've uploaded, right? How crazy is that? Whoa, programming. And then I say you can click on any one you think matches, like this one. This one doesn't match. You can unclick it or whatever. And you find all the cases that match. Can you listen to my music? Promise high quality? No, I cannot. Thinking about this group, this defined group here, and going over every single one with your eyes, literally is like this with your eyes. I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. Process-wise, the physical act of doing that and the mental act of going over every single one to apply a quick filter or a rule to a data set is like what we see here in this algorithm, right? And like, how different is that? Is it different? I don't think it's very different. And when you do stuff like this with the Venn sorter, your ability to quickly pull up one group and then filter it against another group, bring together. Diagonal symmetry has no correlated puzzles with bring together, apparently, right? But the ability to even make that statement that I just made, basically group A has no overlap with group B whatsoever, is, I mean, the game obviously helped me do it, but if I didn't have the game here, I'd probably have to go, okay, group A, which ones are in group A? Let me think. Okay, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. Any more? Did I forget any? Okay, well, let me just, go over this one. Maybe I'd look at all the puzzles. No. Okay. And then group B, and I'd have to keep that in my memory somewhere real quick. Go over group B. This one, no. This one, no. Okay, yeah, okay. And then I'd be like, whew, now that I got both groups, let me just see if any of them came up in both. And then maybe I'd be like, you know what? Diagonal symmetry has nothing in common with bring together. And that would take a lot of mental work, but it's what we do. And perhaps the fact that it feels like mental work is because the volume of comparisons that you have to make are increasing. We all understand that sort of naturally. So I just extracted a principle out of these two, and that makes me very curious. So right now I'm going to write a note. Derive data tips. And I say, apparently, hashtag diag. Oh, it already has the things. These two groups have nothing in common. What's the deal? What does it mean to bring together? Questions. I don't need to have all the answers. I save it. And then I go over here. And now anytime I go over my thoughts, which again, the process works from the bottom up, I have this here, and I cannot edit this. This is a thought that I made in reference to that exploration. So like, this is permanent, but this will always be here. And in case I ever want to be like, what are my lingering questions? No, I didn't actually put a question mark in that. What group is that in? Is it in any group? Okay, cool. I should have known. Methods, right? Methods are what we were just talking about, extracting principles or procedures from increasingly more organized data sets based on your own experience. So I click on method and look at all the stuff I've extracted, right? Apparently these two groups have nothing in common. That's one. I can even do the dot spread. These are all my methods. You can see them clearly here. And these shapes are symmetrical only on the diagonal line. Oh, these are... there seems to be very few notes that both of these categories. Keep that in mind. So bring together an asymmetric apparently has very few as well. That's interesting. So both diagonal symmetry... Hey, it's Adrian. What's up? Both diagonal symmetry and asymmetry have very little to do with bring together. You're like, So now, whenever I'm playing, let's just make a random level. This is why smart people are smart, because they do this stuff. But it happens somewhat naturally. Hey, he's back from Germany. Feel free to say stuff too, or you can use the chat. Okay, so this is a random puzzle. It doesn't seem to have a nature in itself. You can see a diagonal line here, right? You can see some junk over here, some junk over here. But you're thinking to yourself, I'm thinking to myself, if I can bring this together, then it really wasn't diagonal at all. Or if I can use bring together, which I'll explain. Bring together is just when you, hold on. First, make a note of this. This is the demonstration shape on stream. Chape. Cool. And I can just save this. And I'm going to go over here. And I'm going to go to my puzzle mode. And here's what's really cool. I can type in bring together and check it out. No, that's not what happened. What did I do? What do I do? I click this filter. And I type, oh, right here, I have to type it in here. I'm dumb. Bring, oh no, it's the bug I never fixed. So maybe if I do this, okay, hold on. Copy, this supports copy paste. Bam, bring together. I type in a word into the filter option and I get puzzles to observe on the level map. Another cool way to both combine the different ways that you filter and group and make connections with the very sort of common base level, foundational, concrete, universal experience that is solving these puzzles. So these are all bring togethers, right? The filter tells me so we're just gonna pick this one. This is called photo fingers because it looks like photo fingers. Come on guys. But all I'm gonna do is bring these shapes together. So like this one and this one, and then since this one's kind of pointed up and this one's kind of pointed down, I'm gonna do that. And then since this one's over here, I'm just gonna kind of squish these together. Vampire, interesting. So now let me try this kind. I'm gonna bring this one over here, and then I'm gonna bring this one like that. Close. Reset. Why did I even flag this one as bring together? Let's see. Another symmetrical puzzle with bring together, but from the inside around this time. Oh, I was doing bring together incorrectly. So good thing I have this note here. Haha, game working for me. No, it's funny. Is this puzzle symmetric? Yeah? No? Rotationally symmetric? Radial? You slowed down. I bet you were thinking of something. Make a note? Sure thing, Richard, except for I disabled that feature, so leave me alone. Richard, he's so cool. He's always got your back. So this is saying in order to bring together, you have to like unwrap it like this. And like wrap like that. Oh, that was the Fire Emblem, by the way. Dun, 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 dun. Reset. Let me just do that. But from the inside around this time. Don't know what that means, but let's say I want to bring this together by closing this gap. And then I just get rid of that because that's in the corner. And then I do that, and you're like, interesting. Interesting. But anyway, that's what bring together is. So I'm going to go to my notes, click on the demonstration, and go into explore, and it's right back where we want it to be. So this is either going to be a bring together, or it's going to be, or we're going to very likely assume there's some kind of symmetry here. So let's just do that. Blah, blah, blah. I'm going to bring this one down. By the way, my hidden shapes, my hidden eye, just went crazy right there. Check this out. Right here is the, what do I call it? Holy Cross? Or a dagger? Where is it? By the way, this is the improved hidden shape tool. You can scroll down and see all of the thingies. Like here's the push-up bar, and it actually shows you where it is in the thing. Here's the Facebook app. Doesn't that look like Facebook app? Isn't that hilarious? Pinball. There's 2 of them, if you weren't aware. I'm trying to find jewel dagger. There's 2 of them. Oh, there's 3 of them. Okay, I only saw 1. Wow. I wasn't really paying attention, but that's really cool. But anyway, we're going to continue to bring this thing together. So now, I guess, close that. And then I'm going to bring this down. Bring together. Not quite. So reset. Maybe we just bring this one up. Chase BCE, huh? So it looks like neither bring together nor it has no symmetry whatsoever. So let's just take out the slash in the middle. By the way, I'll show you slash right here. It's pretty obvious. Oh, it says 2x slash. There's only 1. Stop it. Okay. There's a box in the corner, which also there's a corner in the corner. But let me show you what small corner box right there. There's bad Tetris, which is there. Okay, robot eyes. No, I need interesting. So we can get rid of this corner box just like this, and it's gone. And now we're just left with this junk. But it looks like it has its own. It does! How did that happen? I don't know. Scroll back a little bit. What did I do? That's basically the entire enLIGHTen engine system working in a live example. I recognized that there was a slash down here, and then so hidden shapes is cool because as you're solving it, you're like, oh, it looks like a blob. It looks like a mess, like a Rorschach test. I can't tell what it looks like. But if you look carefully, there are shapes inside of this shape, which I've already highlighted. And all I did was like, well, this slash looks pretty obvious to me. And since I know the slash is diagonal symmetry, I wanted to get rid of it to see what the puzzle would look like. So I got rid of the slash. I saw this corner box, and I thought this was going to be a rectangle shape right here. But it actually, the system didn't recognize the rectangle, right? So I'm like, I guess it's not a shape. I'll just get rid of this box. And then I know the sequence to get rid of it, right? It's just 4, 8, 12 clicks, right? And that left the rest, and all I did was bring together, which was the original plan in the first place, knowing that this thing didn't have symmetry, guaranteed not to have symmetry, so my next best option was bring together. So let's say I tried to bring it together without doing that box, so maybe I would have done this. And I'm like, ooh, that looks kind of promising. I'm like, I don't know. And then I would have been left with it anyway, small corner box. Let's say if I tried to bring it together by bringing the small corner box up. I would have done, normally I bring the pieces to the big one, but let's say I did this. Yeah, this is not going to work, I can already tell. Normalize, and I got to a different shape. This has symmetry, but you know, too bad. It's not quite what we were looking for. But yeah, that was an interesting exploration of using the filters. We got to get back on track. Using the notes to inspire the group to create a new observation to make a new curious thought to go back and explore, and the explorer to reveal some new possibilities that I have never done before, despite working on this game for years and playing thousands of hours, hundreds, I don't know. So, back over here. You just saw it live. You can probably imagine that this has a very specific analog to what we just discussed, right? And when I was watching this, I was like, you know what this looks like to me? Like, it feels and it looks like when you're learning a new concept and they tell it to you and you're like, yeah, I get it. And it's all fuzzy, right? Concept's all fuzzy and you're like, yeah, I get what you mean, you know. And then you slowly, every time they tell you, that gets a little sharper and a little sharper and a little sharper, and you go over it and over it and over it and over it. This reminded me of the experience of learning something and going from a vague notion and increasing the specificity and the not necessarily the complexity, the specificity, right? You're sorting or organizing the stuff in your head so that it becomes this crisp line, and you're like, yep, I understand. And then once I had that curious thought, I started to look at all these algorithms in terms of, is there an analog learning experience that I can remember that reminds me of this? And that's why, boop. You know, we discuss things here, but the takeaway here is consider that each white line, you can't read that very well. Let's copy it. Copy link. Stop. Kill that. Can we make it big enough? No. Get out. Hold on. Let's just go to this Jamboard. A sticky note? Nope, that's not what I wanted. And pink? Yellow will do. Cancel. That's good enough. Oh, did it not paste all the information? Wow, this thing is bad. It only wanted so much. Each white line represents a discrete piece of information. The red line equals conscious thought or working memory. Perhaps the white line shifts when you move a line is a new thought or a grouping or structuring. Comparisons, comparing two values, is holding two or more discrete pieces of information in working memory. Array access, which is how these algorithms are evaluated, equals long-term memory based on the start of the analysis, perhaps. Diagonal lines, the finished product, the diagonal line, is a coherent thought or a string of thoughts. The sharp drop in any of the smooth diagonal line represents a break in logic or thinking. The overall image, the fact that it's diagonal, is the feeling or understanding of the big picture. So it's a little abstract, which is why that fuzzy line was so interesting to me. I'm like, you get it, but you don't get it. And you get it in a way where you can kind of put the pieces together, but only just a little bit more organized than you are now. You can't really, the thought isn't super clear in your head. And then there's overall white line equals stability, maybe neuroplasticity, directly related to forming of new connections, assumes each white line is important data, can you potentially use another color, blah, blah. So I just threw that on there. You're done. So that's the super curious thought. Because currently we don't have a lot of language, at least I don't, to describe the experience of learning something. A lot of people aren't self-reflective and metacognitive enough. Oh, these are the sharp drops I was talking about. So let's say you're learning and this is what you feel like today. let's say the entire diagonal line across the screen would be, you've completed the course, you now know calculus, right? Well, this tiny little mountain is interesting because it doesn't take, okay, I guess I gotta draw on the screen now. Oh my goodness. Right here. So like, let's say this whole thing is calculus. Calculus. And you need to get this whole diagonal line learned, right, in order to pass the course with, you know, perfectly or flying colors. Let's say this is how you feel about calculus right now. Like you've got this much, right? This is coherent. This is in your head. You're like, yeah, you know, step number 1 through 3. Maybe something happens. I don't quite understand step 4, but this is step 5, right? And you can kind of solve problems using this, right? The course isn't too hard yet. You may feel like you understand it all, but this line here is not exactly smooth, and it's not, and there's so many things over here that fit into this area that you are not taking into account. So your experience is lacking, and if you have this, or rather, if this is in your head but you're not using it, then you're not utilizing all your experience. If you have yet to use this stuff on the right, if you have yet to get in your head, then you clearly don't have the experience. So perhaps these sharp falls are like, yeah, you know some bits, and you can use some bits, and maybe you even refine some of the bits, but till you put it all together, you're not going to be nearly as effective as you should be. And then you can notice the red line scanning both, right, simultaneously to put them together. See how that looked like an entirely separate step right here? Nothing's being processed on the right, nothing. For the time being, this learner can only reevaluate the things they've done, and when they did, they're like, oh, I should have done that. And then they do it again, right? Slowly learning bits, techniques, tips, creeping it up, putting it together, kind of looking at the end and going, oh, it should have been like this, I mastered calculus, kind of a thing. That's how I interpret that algorithm. It's just a metaphor at this point, but I think it's really interesting to see if you can think of or remember somebody who's had a similar experience, right? And because these algorithms are based on the sort of elementary sorting of basic data, I feel like it has the most potential or power to reflect similar mental processes that we go through when learning. I don't know what's happening here. Block merger. Look at that craziness. What the heck would that be? I think my YouTube video is kind of... Okay. That one's interesting. Look at that one. This one reminds me of learning piano, right? I'm going to go back and show you. 1, 2, 3. 2, 3. So this is all the stuff you need to know. For piano, 2,000 individual bits of things you need to learn them and arrange them. That right there feels like a student that gets a teacher finally, and the teacher's like, all right, let's take everything you know, quickly go over it, and then figure out which things you're ready to tackle, and then tackles them in this bottom left. Oh, you can't even see it because my head's in the way. Tackles them in the bottom left corner, right? And then refines those things. So let's say that dual pivot, quick sort. Let's say that after scanning the whole thing, the teacher's like, you need to focus on freaking scales. And finger work. Here's finger work. And important parts, obviously, to the whole thing. And in fact, you can't really do a lot of this complex stuff until you freaking get the basics, right? That's what we were talking about before. So the teacher's like, no big deal. You know a little bit of the basics, but we're gonna put it together in a way that was freaking rock solid, right? We're gonna make it to where when you learn it thoroughly, you won't ever have to go back. And as you can see, the algorithm never goes back, which is kind of interesting. Does it again on the next chunk, slowly making these tiny staircases, and then very in a very refined way, smooths the line out. But look how much jittering back and forth there is on the line right there. That jittering, the repetition, the pattern of repetition I see there. Very interesting. And that overall is what we would consider to be a smooth learning curve. Well, let's think about that for a second. A lot of video games do a lot of things to mess up the way that players learn. But as you can see there, scan the whole thing, right? And then it's like slowly up, refining, building the skills necessary and never going back to revisit them because you've learned them thoroughly. That's kind of interesting, and that's what I might describe as being a smooth learning curve. The complexities that were focused on any one period of time were very, very small until it did these sweeping scans, right? Which are like, you know, placement tests. Like, how much do you know? Where do we need to go from here? Blah, blah, blah. So what the heck would this be? I think it's going to be important to compare this one to the last one. So let's look at that. 37,800 comparisons. Let's just take a snappy snap. Yeah, that's good. We're just gonna float that. Oops, I need to read the chat, don't I? Too many windows. Cool. Okay, so that was this algorithm, max heap sort, but let's look at the result of dual quick pivot sort. Bam. Okay, and let's just drag it back over so you can see 2,000 numbers for both of them. The one that comes after this, which is the one I took the picture of, 37,841 comparisons. Each one of those comparisons is mental work, so do not underestimate. Array accesses, which I think our metaphor was this is access to long-term memory, right? And how many times you do that kind of depends on how big of a thing you tackle and what you're doing with your working memory, so on and so forth. 18,000 versus 40,000. Do I have to stress that even more? So this next one is completely inefficient. Even, I'm not even like, the metaphor is loose as it is right now, but algorithm-wise, was the second one faster? I don't even think we need to worry about that right now. But yeah, the second one is like freaking, I don't even know why I pushed all those things like that. It's kind of like learning a finished piano song before you're ready to get to that point. And like everything that you do is sort of built on trying to directly get that finished quality, which is what I, you know, and this smooth line is the finished quality before you're ready. And when you do, I feel like this algorithm shows how inefficient that is. Or it's a funny way to show that potential learning experience and why it could be so inefficient. You keep trying to do stuff on the end when what you should really be focusing on is the stuff at the beginning. Mini heap sort. I don't know what the heck. What would this be? I feel like this little trick at the end, the fact that this diagonal line is reverse what you might expect, it's kind of like freaking the Karate Kid or whatever, where you're teaching your student a whole bunch of fundamentals and stuff, but they don't think they're fundamentals, right? And they don't quite understand how it fits into the grand picture. And then all of a sudden you're like, pick up your jacket. And he's like, why, Mr. Lin, jacket, pick up your jacket, jacket on. And then he kicks him and he knows Kung Fu all of a sudden. That's what this is. You've been learning it all along. You just didn't know. And now we're just going to do something real quick to put it all into place. That's interesting. I could look at these forever, but we're going to move on to one final thing because I've been streaming for a long time. Sorting algorithms. So now we're going to talk a little bit back. We're going to back up a little bit. You know, enLIGHTen has that sound mapping. We talked a little bit about sheet music and how if you didn't know that they had a correlated sound to every note, then you would miss a whole world of potential experiences and appreciation. So for the final thing I'm going to leave you with, boop, I looked at this whole video, an hour of sorting algorithms. And listen, we can listen to this one. Okay, we can listen to this one. Oh. This one has more details on the side. How many swaps, how many writes to the main array, how many writes to an auxiliary array, so on and so forth. So listen carefully. Okay, now listen to this. Okay, interestingly enough, I love this in Indo. Hold on. Okay, interesting, right? It sounds like music. There's an hour worth of algorithms in this one, and only 2 algorithms sound anything close to music. All the rest, as you heard, sound like noise, or just like it's noise. Very interesting, right? It's kind of what I was talking about with the accidental fire emblem melody in playing enLIGHTen. It's kind of like the sheet music example, where if you really didn't know, if you were watching this video without sound, you're just like, whatever, like completely, looks like every other algorithm. But when you listen to it with sound, all of a sudden you're jamming and you're like, what the heck? Whatever this algorithm does, even in the face of a random sort, just because these colors are each associated with a single tone, a unique tone each, created music. That was crazy. And you gotta wonder, with so many different ways that people think, the weird things they say, the odd things they do, you wonder, like, is there a whole bunch of different experiences and different ways to learn? Or is it relatively simple and we're just not listening to the, like, we're being bedazzled by the noise or we're not listening to the music, so to speak. Like maybe a whole different sort of correlated mapping of sensory inputs would give us a much firmer access to listening to our own thoughts sort of metacognitively, and a metaphor, if you will, for talking about it to other people. And if you think that's trivial, we'll stop, because the fact that having access to an entire language by making a correlation is so interesting. enLIGHTen does a lot. Back to enLIGHTen. enLIGHTen does a lot because in order to help people learn these things, which is something that I do naturally, every shape has a name. This one looks like a dart, I call it dart. This one looks like bamboo, I call it bamboo. Buried his guts. And you got coconuts. What's the lesson? What's the takeaway? This one looks like a bow tie, so I called it bow tie. And this one looks like a butterfly, so I call it butterfly. And this is a slash, so it's a slash. You think that may be more or less obvious. It's not. I watch people play this game without the names. I watch people play other games. They don't even take the time to denote anything, right? It's like, so that's like, you could consider that to be an entire sensory experience. Visuals mapping to real world objects that people would completely miss unless you cue them in on it, right? And the sound associated with enLIGHTen, they could completely miss it unless all of a sudden they have a musical ear and they're cued in on it. With these sorting algorithms, that music you would have completely missed, completely. And now, like, even if you're not a musical person, I've only played that song for you once for the sorting algorithm. I bet you could tell me a little bit more about its sequential nature just because I told you it sounded like music. And if you thought about it long enough, you'd probably be able to describe its odd way of skipping over things and sorting things and how long it took. And just because you have that metaphor map, like, that's super interesting. You are using your brain to unlock more of your brain, and that's kind of the positive feedback loop that I tried to generate with the enLIGHTen and try to research and discover more. Super interesting. So I do it all the time. I see it all the time. The more things that you experience, like visual arts, music, sports, programming, literature, whatever, like the more of these hooks that can potentially just sink into. But there is also potential for a new type of sensory experience, right? We have sight, sound, touch, smell, taste, right? Perhaps the metacognitive self-awareness of your own thinking and what's happening in your brain could be considered a new type of sense. Maybe it's like new colors that we've never even imagined, a new type of color. I always remember the giver in the book, and the fact that the special thing was the fact that they could see color when they otherwise wouldn't, which is a really clever trick to put in a book because you're just reading the words anyway. You assume things are normal when they say person wakes up and walks across the room. But they were living in a black and white existence, and color was a little piece of magical special something. Yeah. So, gave me a lot to think about. I just wanted to explain this all in one stream. YouTube is probably going to flag it because I keep playing other people's music. Kind of pisses me off. This is the most freaking educational thing I can potentially do. I'm only playing clips, YouTube. It's like you make it hard for people to teach people and you wonder why the world is stupid. But that's a completely different issue. I'm done talking for now. I'm going to switch over to this. So thanks for watching. My name is Richard Terrell. I didn't say it at the top, but too bad. If you made it this far, that's good for you. My name on Twitter is Kirby Kid. I do a lot of this stuff with learning and game design, the fusion of the two. As you can see, I have plenty of interactive examples. I've been doing this for years. If you've been paying attention to the timestamps on the blogs that I've referenced and the things that I say, super interested in it. Always looking for more interesting people to talk to and projects to get feedback on or collaborate with or help or whatever. So if you're one of the few out there that even can stand watching this video this long, then you should probably hit me up because it's not enough of us out there. But until next time, guys, peace.